Welcome back, everybody. It's Andi Akili. I'm Auntie, and I am still sitting with the wonderful Andi. And in the last episode, we kind of covered what was gender apathetic from the inside and what was her journey. One of the big questions that I had that I really wanted to explore with you is, since you are gender apathetic and you wound up being the facilitator for TGX 360, what what was it that you felt called to stand with the trans and other gender expansive community? What does that look like? Help me walk me through that, please.
Sure. So I was applying for the job in early 2022. And I wasn't looking for a job. I was actually looking back to get into creative industry pursuits and figure out what exactly I wanted at that point, because I had come to terms with I probably wouldn't be showing back up in a way, in a business sense, that would really fit neatly for a lot of companies. And also, I wasn't interested in doing that. When I was sent the job that I have now, I went to the website, as anyone does in our modern era, and looked at all of the leadership. And then when I saw that there was the TGX 360 initiative, that was actually what made me decide that I wanted to take the job, because even my earliest experiences in the community, I would say probably 2005, that I have always had trans folks that have been the some of the most welcoming and also less centered individuals in the community. So in LGBTQ plus community spaces, even in like 2005, I would say the folks that were inclusive were those that were already in their experience living in a trans experience, and the ones that were the most exclusive would probably be cis and gay. And there was not a lot of intersection, there was not overlap, and there was a sense of disparagement, I would say. And that's something that, while I'd seen it change in practice from entertainment, you don't really see sort of a structural change like in entertainment later on, I would say. And that was when I was in undergrad that I saw that sort of discriminatory behavior, and also probably inhibited why I was never forthcoming really about gender, or felt comfortable having the kind of conversations that I'm able to have now. I would say by the 2010s, I was seeing inclusion in entertainment spheres and like a sense of that person is cool. It wasn't necessarily, it still wasn't thoughtful in the execution of inclusion. So when I saw the website for this Chamber of Commerce being intentional and being inclusive, it was a place that I finally felt comfortable plugging in, because, I mentioned in the last episode, my production company was called Your Gay Atlanta. So it was gay community things. And we would talk about the acronym and how it grew, but there wasn't the level of consideration. I wasn't even out in Your Gay Atlanta. So if I couldn't be out in my own production company, my partner didn't appreciate that. My partner didn't want me. My partner felt that it was pulling focus for me to express myself as myself. So to see that not only would that not be something I would encounter as an employee, but it was something that the organization was fighting for on the side of employment for individuals of experiences that were even more pronounced than my own experience. That's what led me ultimately. That and the executive director's hair color were the two things that led me to apply for the job. And
Uh,
The rest is, and I tested it. The second biggest font size on my application was they, them. It was right under my name, and I made it big because if it wasn't going to be okay, I wasn't going to be there.
I think you found a home, and I'm happy to have stumbled into it myself.
I'm so glad that I think our first experiences dovetailed and it was such a beautiful thing. It's wonderful to have you there, and also just I think the voice that you're bringing just from the vet perspective and all of the intersections that I would say people mention but don't share, the fact that you've been as open to sharing how you feel and feedback and where there are growth opportunities, it makes such a big difference because
Yeah, it just I think one of the big sort of stumbling blocks on that I see, and this is just from my own personal interactions, is that we focus, when I say we, general people focus on this idea that you're included as part of the group if you conform.
mm-hmm, mm-hmm.
Now, as much as I enjoyed my time in the army, that was a big component. You have to comply, you have to conform. There were regulations about everything, what you can say, how you can say it. And I had to suppress who I was. And so I would find little ways to subvert it. And I'm sure that I've told you at least a couple of stories of how I subverted expectations because I was just so done with everything. And growing up, the idea of challenge what you think, because your beliefs, your ideas are only as good as the challenges to them. So I had to get into that. And then that's what I try and bring to the table, because there are orthodoxies, and my pet peeve of them all is the authentic self. Now, my perception of that little phrase is not doesn't jive with everyone, and that's okay. But we need to challenge it because, or at least I feel that we need to challenge it, because if it's just this force majeure that people go along with, and they're being told conflicting messages of you can be yourself but don't be yourself. And that's where I really want to push back, so that people can be themselves and find ways to express themselves. And I'm going to hand it over to you, because I'm going to just rabbit trail with that.
I agree with that so much, and I think that the caveat with authentic self is the authentic self you're able to commit to at any given moment. What is one's authentic self? I think as a person who has always been really committed to living, to being genuine, to being the most genuine version of myself, it is sometimes difficult when people ask, well, were you disingenuous up until this point? No. And I sometimes feel concerned that the amount of destiny that feels packed into authentic self has sort of a finality and also a brush stroke over the fluidity and the shape and change that a person goes through, because authentic self seems like you were hatched and then there was some part of you that was there the entire time, and that is the only and the ultimate. And I don't know, I think that sometimes that language feels a little the I understand that for a lot of people it helps give a strong sense of, hey, I have not, like, being trans isn't the transition, it's not changing who I am, it's showing a part of me that's not been able to come to the light until this point. But I do agree with you that there's just something about the term itself that I think the whole person, the journey, the individual that goes through the entirety of it is precious and vital and deserves the level of thought that I think authentic self limits to one place or another.
You hit on something that that's been escaping me, the finality and the idea that, again, the idea of the authentic self is only as good as it serves the greater community and not the person. There's no room for growth. And my expression of being a trans woman is very different. It might be one day I'm completely kitted out in tactical gear because I just want to be a slug, and I might want to wear heels and makeup and go to the gun range. I would never go in this dress because uh, boobs are brass catchers, and that is not fun.
Oh no, I never thought of that.
Oh my god, I I had gone to a range with someone I was involved with, and she, as the Monty Python, she had huge tracts of land, and she wore this very low cut shirt, and there was a lot of decolletage, and that first piece of brass went yoink.
No.
Second degree burn right
Second
between.
degree.
Yeah,
Oh my gosh.
yeah.
She never
It's
forgot. She never forgot that date.
nope.
Oh, just
Um,
trying to dress adorably for the occasion and literally burned by the experience.
mhm. Yeah. So anytime I go with a femme presenting person, it's wear a high collar shirt and a ball cap.
That makes it make more sense that everybody going to the gun range looks is just the fashion same. Usually it is a pretty, without exception.
and that happened to something like that happened to me. I was in Afghanistan, and we were doing a qualification range because you want to keep your skills sharp.
Yes.
And I was spotting for this one guy, and I was standing back and to the right of him, and a piece of brass got stuck in between my vest and my neck. So I had a third degree right here.
Oh, oh my God. Awful.
Yeah, not fun.
Did you get extra points for that? Can you get an extra little thing on your Oh no.
No, no. Some
Brutal.
band-aids and some burn cream. That was about it.
Oh my gosh. Action movies are so misleading. Everybody is just in a tank top and they are
I
they
I never would have thought about it like that, but yes.
I've played
Uh
Mortal Kombat for forever and I always put Sonya in the bikini top. I am a jerk. I'm
well,
wishing for her an early fatality.
you know, Mortal Kombat is more melee based, so you don't have the hot brass problem.
That's true.
Um,
There a lot of Sonya Blade and Jax are supposed to be military, ex-military. I have fired things off with somebody dressed like what is that volleyball game?
Dead or alive?
Dead or alive. Yeah,
Oh
I
god.
definitely had Sonya Blade firing off artillery dressed like dead or alive.
I think my favorite expression had to have been on Mythbusters. And it was Carrie Byron, in a sundress, hair just flowing in the breeze, and she's blasting a minigun. That was like that's it. That's me. um
You met yourself.
for real. And I want that for other trans people,
Yeah.
for the ultra femme or the ultra masculine to be valid. You know, the the atypical people must be equally as valid. Um, and there's a place for authentic self. That place is just not with me.
I
If
think that it maybe helps. It's a tool for some people, but I think that pasting it over the whole community, I think that's like you said, I think it's the finality can sometimes create a reductive sensibility.
how do you define that? Because I want to make sure I understand what you're saying.
It's like you are only the moment that you have. Well, first of all, not everyone transitions the same way. Not everyone can transition the same way. Your authentic self is this version of your binary trans experience being accepted by the greater society, and that's your authentic self. People are all along in different spaces than I know that I'm guessing the argument would be that the term has flexibility and it meets you wherever you are. But I just think that the perception for hearing that, I'll maybe to add another thing. So, I told you that I went through a huge amount of weight loss as a teenager.
Mm-hmm.
I thought I couldn't be my authentic self until I had completely physically transformed because I'm, a teenage person with a tremendous amount of loose skin and all of these other things that do not present in a way that was expected of me or expected of a person that had it was was I not my authentic self until I were able to pay $10,000 that I didn't I put myself through college. I was out of the house at 17. Was I not my authentic self as I was existing at those times? I wouldn't have thought so. I would have told you back then, I will be my authentic self when. I think that kind of dangles a carrot in a way. Like, I am only my authentic self when I achieve this level that the bar can constantly be moving. Is it your authentic self when you like what you look like in the mirror? Is it your authentic self when people accept you and also like what you look like? I think the ambiguity around reception is the challenge. Maybe somebody's their authentic self, but it never presents with all of the things that we are looking for as a society as cues for that's a trans person, that's a non-binary person, that's a gay person. Like, I think the definition just doesn't give enough room for people to just be and to be valued where they are. Not until they reach something are they their authentic self. I think it creates that, potentially it can create that problem.
Interesting. To kind of go back to something that you said in your introduction, is your perception of that uh, at least partially a function of growing up in a very evangelical home?
What, just of achieving one's authentic self?
Yeah, and your broader perspective of gender and everything.
I think that fundamentalism definitely leads to black or white thinking, which in once you get into therapy, you realize is a function of illness as well. I think that the further that I go, the more I notice that there is a human capacity for responding to black or white thinking. It's you're there or you're not. You're good or you're bad. And I think that this, hmm, I think one thing that I liked from religion was that God was supposed to love you no matter what. God was supposed to be like, look, there are some things about you that are you're kind of a piece of shit sometimes, but God loves you. I do think that there was this sense of needing to achieve a certain thing to be worthy. And it's something that I see outside of the religious community too. I think there is like um, a very narrow window. I think we all know what someone who people perceive as successful looks like. Coincidentally, on your last video where you were sharing just about how letting people express their sexuality is such an exhausting topic and people are so limiting of that, especially with women, there's a demonization. uh because you added the caveat in the video about, which I thought was a perfect caveat, like minors need to be excluded from this conversation. YouTube popped up this video of Mary Kay Letourneau, where Mary Kay Letourneau, who was the person in 1997, was arrested because she was sleeping with her former student who was very much a minor. But
Oh,
that person presents like a successful person. Mary Kay Letourneau has size privilege. She is white and small and pretty, and she continues to insist. She's passed away. She died of colon cancer in 2020. But I oftentimes think we have these portraits of people. That person would be a person that you would say, oh, if I could have the social acceptance of this person, maybe I have arrived. But people who are in that space have beyond their own things that they're going through. And I think things like, I think that I see direction in terms like authentic self, but I also see that connotation that we've mentioned before, where it's this put together, uh, universally accepted thin white woman who possibly has problems beyond our comprehension that people can draw up in that term.
yeah, I very much see what you're saying, and it I can see the utility of it. I'm big into utilitarian statements. I can see the utility to help a person, feel comfortable in a time when, particularly for trans people, transition is tumultuous and it's a never-ending process. The fact that I'm never going to get out of puberty again is kind of terrifying. Um, but there's this defined period. Actually, it's not so defined, but there's this period where you're not quite one, you're not quite the other.
Mm-hmm.
And if that's what you're going for, then okay, that might feel a little more stable. But for someone like me that, you know, has a destination in mind, it's difficult to put into place. And the finality of, pardon me, of a time of change is just does not compute.
I think it's daunting. And as a person who's, what we talked about gender, I love the description of you're in an in-between place. I would say that's my stop off point. That's where I live. I live in the in between, and not even an in between where some people will say you feel close to both or none, or I I feel just sort of ambivalent. And I think part of that is, I had gender affirming surgery. At 23, I had a full body lift, and the doctor said they would throw in breast implants because they thought I would look better. So I attempted to transition at that time. I never refer to it just because I never detransitioned. I got to a place where I thought I always wanted to be, which was I'll my body will look like what I think my body should look like. And I found that the social expectations were unbearable. And the social expectations caused incidents that involved me being hospitalized and me going through just major life changes that changed but it, I guess, revealed more to me. And so my ability to live in that liminal space is a comfort to me. It's just, I guess, challenging because as you mentioned, like, because puberty for me really started in my mid 20s, and it was just as unbearable, and it was maybe lonelier because I didn't know anybody else who was going through that at the time. I had a friend who had transitioned who came to visit me when I was recovering. I had many examples, but there was still sort of a lack of space. So I try to be really diligent in letting people occupy whatever, wherever, however they're showing up. And I notice we still have a lot of way to go, particularly with, a couple of my spouse and also my long-term partner in the asexual community. We're not doing great in the LGBTQ plus community. That plus is hiding a lot of folks who end up just sort of feeling atomized and living on Reddit. I don't know.
Yeah, I was talking to my wife about that, and she expressed frustration, just like, hey, we need a handier something for such a broad and expanding acronym.
Yes.
um and I understand people's pushback about queer. I have my own personal issues on queer. That's a whole nother video.
Oh, I would love. We have to schedule that sometime because I would love to hear that.
um but yeah, I think the easier people can convey a concept, the easier it makes income, incorporating it into conversation, and the less obtrusive it becomes in a general term. I've been porting the TGX acronym into other organizations where people are like, how do I, talk about this? They're like, okay, here's something. And they're like, wait, this exists? Yeah. And they're like, holy crap. And some basic, it wound up being a one sheeter of how do you talk about and talk to people within this community? Some easy things like don't use honorifics because that gets really awkward.
Yeah.
Sir, ma'am, that also gets really awkward as well. But also just we use singular they in conversation, and it's only really the absolute pedants of language that want to get their knickers in a wad. I'm like, why? Why make it more difficult? And I understand, like, I heard a linguist talk about it. He actually had a PhD in linguistics, and he's talking about how the singular they can, for some people, can increase the mental load because it's more ambiguous. Okay, that makes sense. If you've got multiple theys within, a sentence, that can get confusing. Um, but that's why people have names. Um,
Yes. Yes.
and as much as I love sharing pronouns, what I do is I don't talk about my pronouns until I get to a point where I want to talk to this person again, or they might want to talk to someone else about me.
Yes.
Um, because for me, the feeling is it's like if I declare my pronouns, I'm expecting you. It's an obligation to talk to someone else about me, and I don't want that. Within Out Georgia and within the TGX 360, yeah, I do talk about my pronouns because there's an implied consistency.
Yes.
It's also a cultural thing.
Yes.
Uh, we have the overarching culture, and so that's where I look at it from. But otherwise, if it's just a rando on the street, they don't need to know my pronouns.
No. And whatever that's why sometimes I default to whatever else someone thinks is fine. I've always thought of myself as, and it was a pain point during my multi-phased adolescence. I know that I'm a book report. I am not a math worksheet. Some people are plug it in, it's a couple steps, it's easy. I know who I'm for, and if people don't want to go into 17-page dissertation on some fringe sci-fi concept, it is okay if they'll never know me like that. It's okay if they're in my family. I can still love someone from the cumulative behavior I see them performing in their lives and the goodwill that they bring, and not have any ill will if they never check that one out from the library. Who has a library card? Who among us?
Yeah, and I think, and I love how you bring up goodwill. I think intent does matter. If someone's making a good faith effort, I'm never going to correct them.
Yes.
Um, you know,
And the same even goes in, I think the tricky thing is in TGX 360. It's my job, speaking of a step back, it's my job to uplift everyone there. It's not my story that's important. There are amazing stories that we do center on and do bring inspiration. I love spending time with Gabrielle Claiborne, and she's someone who many people have her book and have seen her TED Talk, and I love that. I think that story is so powerful. But my own twisty A&E miniseries, if people see somebody who's AFAB and femme presenting who is in the space, it's really just my job to make sure those who don't have the kind of under the radar existence that I sometimes lead by no intention of my own, to just use my resources to augment the ideas and the innovation that happen there. Because I do think that there are challenges very specific to binary trans folks, and maybe definitely gender expansive folks who present differently than I do. And I want to make sure those stories are centered and we're being thoughtful and as nuanced as possible, taking on a big challenge like how the state of Georgia perceives and employs and practices the kind of equality we're all looking for.
Yep. And for all you people out in YouTube land, I'm gonna link in the description to TGX 360. Maybe if you don't have an organization like that, maybe you want to get with some people and start it in your own state or your own city so that people have a resource because we are stronger together.
Yes. And
Um,
as of right now, as of recording, there are about 3 chambers that are doing LGBTQ plus TGX initiatives, 3 across the country. So look for your chamber of commerce, uh, and don't be intimidated by the odds. There was a survey, only 26 out of 100 civilians said that they perceive Georgia to be a safe space for LGBTQ plus folks. Compared to other states like New York and California, where that's over 95 people out of 100, we're still here. We are still doing work here. And it matters. It matters where it's vital, and it matters where people may have a general sense of welcome or a sort of a kindness that may not be present in other places. This is needful everywhere. So
and as we come to the end of our conversation, what I'm going to give you the floor. What are the things that you wish um, outsiders could understand about being gender apathetic or non-binary?
sure, I would say the thing that I wish people could understand is you don't have to have the same experience. Me sharing my experience is something that I experience and isn't intended as a step to proselytize anyone else to genderless vacuum of questions and not answers. Everybody has their own way that they survive the world that they're born into without asking. And I usually step back and support other people because that better shows that sense. But I do think it's our diversity that makes us strong. Everyone has perspectives and things that you might not know about and that you may relate to. So two people, some of the closest people to me are people with strong gender presentations, and it's not it's not because I think they're secretly agender. It's because we both admire the way that we show up in the world. So the joy of having conversations a little bit deeper than hello, this is my name and these are my pronouns, are that in other stories you can both see yourself, if not in the place the person is now, in different times or experiences that you've gone through. So have a conversation, and also please release the sense, not that there are any gatekeepers watching, but the sense that a person who is agender or outside of gender norms has to follow some sort of David Bowie, Prince, Annie Lennox. If the budget were there, baby, we'd be going for it. But a lot of us are just doing the best with what we're taking home. And the rent is too damn high, as we all know. So don't judge when there aren't customized options in a fashion world that's still pretty narrow. Just be open-minded, because a person is much more than their clothes. And I hope that we know that as a society, but it's okay to believe that, and to double click on what a person has to say. That's all.
That is a hell of a mic drop. Thank you so much, Andy, for the gift of your time. It has been
Oh,
absolutely wonderful.
it's been a joy. Thanks for all you do. Thanks for this channel. And thanks to you at home watching. If you're not subscribed, highly endorse as a fellow subscriber.
Thank you. I'm blushing very hard. Anyhow, for all you wonderful people out in YouTube land, be well, be safe, take charge.